My name is Mary Van Aken. My name is Mary Van Aken, and I am the Director of Publicity at Macmillan Children's Publishing Group.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Luby, Marketing Manager for the MacKids School and Library team.
Hi, I'm Elise Villalobos. I'm the Marketing Coordinator for the MacKids School and Library team.
Hi, I'm McKeith, and I'm the Marketing Assistant for the School and Library team.
We're excited to give you an overview of our Winter 2022 list of titles, including picture books, chapter books, middle grade, and young adult titles from all of our imprints at MacKids. Our imprints include Feiwel and Friends, Farrar, Straus Giroux Books for Young Readers, Henry Holt Books for Young Readers, For a Second, Roaring Brook Press, Neon Squid, and Odd Dot. And we're so excited to have you here today.
As you may have heard, we're also very excited to have two special guests with us later in the event. Lizz Huerta, author of The Lost Dreamer, and Gary Paulsen, author of Northwind, both coming to bookshelves everywhere in winter. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. In the chat, you'll see a link for a full list of titles we're discussing today. This link was also included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download it, please open that email, scroll to the bottom and click on the link and upload it from there. You can also download the title list by copying the URL on this screen into your web browser. Indeed, if you could just click to the next screen, you'll see that link. In the digital review copy column for picture books and graphic novels, you can click through to read a digital review copy on issue. Please do not share these links as they are used for review purposes only. In the digital review copy for middle grade and young adult titles, you'll find a link to request the book on NetGalley. As we only have 1 hour to present, this is not our full list of titles. Please subscribe to our MacKids School and Library e-newsletters to keep up to speed with all of our new and upcoming releases. If you are live tweeting today, please use #MacKidsPreview. Finally, we expect all participants to maintain an atmosphere of respect and fairness. Anyone who violates this standard of behavior, including in any form of harassment, may, at the discretion of the organizers, be immediately removed.
And now for some technical details. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a section for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions during the event. Booklist offers closed captioning on all of their webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar. From there, you can select show or hide subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting subtitle settings. Today's event will be recorded and the recording will be shared with you after the event. And now over to Elise to introduce our first special guest.
Hi, so today I have the great pleasure of introducing Trisha and Lizz. Lizz Huerta is a widely admired short story writer and essayist, published in Lightspeed, The Cut, The Portland Review, The Rumpus, Miami Rail, and more. Her short story, The Wall, is included in the anthology A People's Future of the United States. Huerta has also been a 2018 Breadlow Fellow, a 5-time Bona Fellow, and the winner of the Lumina Fiction Contest, selected by Roxane Gay, who called her writing a menacing, inescapable seduction. She has appeared on C-SPAN's Book TV to discuss the erasure of Mexican-American studies in Arizona and has taught creative writing to homeless youth through San Diego nonprofit, So Say We All. You can turn your cameras and mics on, Lizz and Trisha, and I'll have you guys take it away with the Q&A.
Hi, everyone. I'm so pleased to present this fantastic special book to you all, and to Lizz, who is one of the most inspiring and just compelling authors I've had the pleasure to work with. And this is just a really special book that I'm excited to talk about. I have the privilege of being Lizz's editor at Farrar, Straus Giroux Books for Young Readers, and we're just going to have a short conversation about where this book was inspired from and how the process of writing it went. Lizz, can you give us a preview of what's inside the book?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. The Lost Dreamer is a dual narrative young adult fantasy that is informed, inspired by pre-European contact Mesoamerican landscape and culture. It's the story of two young women, Indira and Saya, who are both born with the same gift of sacred dreaming, but born in very different circumstances. Indira is born into a culture built around her sacred gift in the sacred city of Alcanza, which is like a big pyramid temple city. And Saya is born out in the wild with no training for her gift. And there is a prophecy about someone called the Lost Dreamer, who will either change or destroy the world. And the narrative is like, which one of these two characters is the Lost Dreamer? And there's all sorts of wonderful side characters and a bad guy who's so truly terrible that I get goosebumps of anger when I have to reread his scenes. And it's just the absolute book of my heart. And I'm so grateful that it's going to be in the world.
As we all. Everyone who sees the cover and hears the story of, how you wrote it and how it came about is just so inspired and excited. And I would love to hear more about, what was the impetus for you writing this story? I know that this is the book of your heart, that it's been, in the works and has been in your life for years and years. What was the moment where you decided, I'm going to write this book?
I believe it was 2006 when I decided that it was time to write fantasy that's based on my ancestral history. I hadn't even considered it until I was in a short story or a novel writing class with Cindy Pon, another author, and she was workshopping Silver Phoenix. And I thought, wait a minute, if she can write a fantasy based on ancient Chinese culture, why can't I write a fantasy based on my ancestral history? And I ruminated on it for about 5 years before I started to write it. And it just wouldn't leave me alone. The idea came to me one day about someone who goes to the same place every night when they dream, and it wouldn't leave me alone. And it didn't leave me alone for years and years and years. And so I just kept revisiting it until it was birthed. And I've been astounded at what came out of me, about what was possible after just, following the story. It just wouldn't leave me alone. It almost haunted me until I listened to it and let it come through.
That's amazing. And so what an inspiration to have this project be with you for so long and to see it come to fruition. Of course, I know that this is such a book of your heart, that it was inspired by your ancestral history. And a lot of it was based on that history. But I wonder, when you were creating this world, what parts of it did you give yourself freedom to invent? And how did you make that decision?
When I decided to work within this world, I done a lot of traveling through Mexico and a lot of the archaeological sites, Tenochtitlan, Tulum, Chichen Itza, Uxmal, Palenque. And while I wanted to inhabit that world creatively, just for me, it didn't feel right to take anything from any living or transition cultures. I thought, you know what, let me just go into my imagination. And I thought about it for a long time. And I was like, other writers have been doing this forever. So I just say it's kind of ancestrally informed imaginings. And so while it has the flavor, for lack of a better word, of this world, there's nothing absolutely taken or lifted from these histories, these stories, these myths. It's all of my imagination.
Yeah, and there's something I think so powerful and something to be said about that. Reclaiming that history, but also giving yourself permission to let your imagination run free, and especially play in a world that we don't often see represented in media. Already how much I love your world, so I'll move on. One of the things I think that we always keep in mind, especially as children's book editors, is, what readers do we hope to reach? What do we want them to take away? So I wonder, when you picture a person, holding your book and reading it, who do you see, or who do you hope to see?
The other day I was in Chula Vista, where I was born and raised here in San Diego. And Chula Vista is exactly between downtown San Diego and downtown Tijuana. It's a borderland city. It's a border city. And I was driving past this bus stop after school, and it was filled with, it was the bus stop I went to when I was in high school. And it was just filled with these brown-skinned teenagers. And some of them were like me, like little goth Mexican kids. And I just had this feeling of like, I want them to be holding my book at that bus stop. I want to see my book, with these kids at the bus stop or on the trolley. My goal is to reach readers who are like me, really wanting to see themselves in a story and a fantastical story, to plant that seed of curiosity and of imagination from this ancestral history that we're not really taught in this education system, even though it's of this land. And that's who my ideal reader is, those kids at the bus stop, and really anybody who wants to inhabit this world. But my ideal reader is probably somebody who is like me at that age, just really curious and a book lover.
Yeah, and I think part of what is so wonderful about The Lost Dreamer is how you represent these readers in a world that, is fantastical, that is full of adventure and magic. And it's part of the, slew of books that are coming out now that give people of color permission to experience so many kinds of stories. So I hope those readers and those kids read them at the bus stop too.
Me too. I'll cry. I will cry if I see my book at a bus stop. I'll just probably have to pull over and just start
right. Must snap it too for posterity. Well, this is more of a craft question and more about the process of writing. I was thinking that some of the most interesting people in a story are its side characters, not always the main characters or the antagonists. So I'm wondering if there were people in The Lost Dreamer that you particularly enjoyed writing.
Oh, they're the twin aunts, who are super snarky and sarcastic, and they're just kind of like the chorus in the background, just how I had in my life. I had the primary characters of my life. Then there was always a bunch of aunties in the background saying their piece and, working around. So I love the aunts. I love the Ilkan, the Jaguar warrior women. Oh, I love them so much, particularly Raro. And a character that comes in towards the end of the book, Akal. I love her. She is who I want to be when I grow up. She's so self-possessed and wise and compassionate and caring. I look at her and I'm like, oh, you are who I want to be when I grow up. If that's, do we ever grow up? I don't know.
That's a very good point. Do we really? Well, I guess for the last question is, what do you want our educators, our librarians, and our teachers to impart to their readers when they place this book in their hands? If there was like one thing that you could choose?
I would say this story is about how we're all interconnected, not just as humans, but with the living earth, with the elements, that we are one and our actions affect everything that happens. And there's a lot of responsibility in that. And there's also a lot of possibility in that. And to trust the story that is emerging through you, because that's what I had to tell myself and my characters the entire time I was writing the book, to trust the story and to make choices that will move you forward in a way that's best for everybody.
Beautifully said. I think that's our time, unless I'm mistaken. I think I just got...
that is unfortunately all the time we have, although I could listen to you all talk about this book for so much longer. Thank you so much, Trisha.
Thank you so much for having me.
We
Thank
are
you for
so
having
excited for The Lost Dreamer to debut this March, and teachers and librarians, be sure to add it to your TBR list. Next up, I'll be buzzing about some of our picture book titles. Okay, so first, how many of you have seen the new Aretha Franklin biopic, Respect, starring Jennifer Hudson? I saw it a few weeks ago. I loved it, and I learned so much about the incredible activism work of Aretha Franklin. Next slide, please. Aretha grew up singing gospel music in Southern churches where her father, a minister and prominent civil rights activist, preached. When she was only 16 years old, Aretha joined her father's friend, Martin Luther King Jr., on a nationwide bus tour to sing while he preached. Next slide, please. At age 18, she moved to New York after signing a record contract. And in 1967, she sat down at the piano to record her cover of Respect. And it's the message of that song that's at the very heart of this new picture book biography by Hanif Abdul-Rakib and illustrated by Ashley Evans. This song became the anthem and the rallying cry of the civil rights movement as protesters marched in the streets. Next slide. It's a song of empowerment that continues to inspire people around the world who are fighting to make change. This book draws connections to current events like Black Lives Matter protests, and also includes a powerful author's note about how the legacy of Aretha Franklin's activism lives on in a world still fighting for freedom and inspires young people to sing their own truth. Pair this picture book with a playlist of Aretha's songs, and you've got a story time that will have kids dancing and singing along while learning about the Queen of Soul. Next, Eva Chen is the author of such acclaimed picture books as Juno Valentine and the Magical Shoes, Roxy the Last Unisaurus Rex, and A is for Awesome. I Am Golden is her most personal story to date. I Am Golden is a love letter to Eva's parents who immigrated from China and honors the sacrifices they made for their family. It's a celebration of Chinese culture, the feasts filled with delicious food, and the achievements made by so many Chinese Americans throughout history. And most of all, it's a wish for her 3 children who are half Chinese, a wish that they will know how beautiful they are, that within them burns a golden flame that is their secret strength and power. When the world tells them they are too different, she hopes they will remember their magic. They are the hopes and dreams of their ancestors. Next slide, please. The book also includes a moving note from both Eva and the illustrator Sophie Diao, whose parents are also Chinese immigrants. Next slide, please. Eva wrote this book during the COVID-19 pandemic, when there was a rise in anti-Asian rhetoric and hate crimes. She shares her experience growing up in New York City, where she experienced bullying and discrimination in school, and the loneliness she experienced navigating between 2 different cultures. Next slide. She hopes this book will serve as a reminder to her children and to Asian children everywhere that they are loved, they are beautiful, and they are golden. Next, Michelle Duster tells the story of her great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, in this beautiful picture book biography illustrated by Coretta Scott King Award honoree artist Laura Freeman. As Michelle describes her, Ida B. Wells was a boss, and her achievements were truly groundbreaking. Next slide, please. When her parents died in a yellow fever epidemic, she was left to raise her siblings. She began her career as a teacher and a co-owner of the Memphis Free Speech newspaper, where she wrote about social and political issues. She was eventually removed from her teaching position for writing about the separate and unequal school systems. In 1884, when she was removed from a train for refusing to move to the car for Black people, so she sued the railroad company, and her case was taken to the Supreme Court. In 1982, when 3 of her friends who owned a grocery store were tragically lynched, Ida exposed the truth about what happened through her journalism, urging Black people in Memphis to boycott white-owned businesses. She received death threats and her printing press was destroyed, so she moved to New York and continued her journalism career. Next slide. She became involved in the women's suffrage movement and was a co-founder of the NAACP. She refused to be silenced, even in the face of threats she received. For nearly 50 years, she fought for equality and justice, and her legacy lives on today. This is an important book to add to your classroom libraries that belongs on shelves alongside the stories of civil rights heroes like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr. Next, Charlie Palmer, who won a CSK John Steptoe Award for his debut picture book, Mama Africa, delivers a riveting tall tale about the greatest basketball player ever known in his new picture book, The Legend of Gravity. Have you heard about Gravity? He's the new kid on the Hillside Project's basketball team, the Eagles. I heard he once jumped so high that his teammates went out for ice cream before he came back down. I heard he once scored 150 points in the first quarter of a game all on his own. Next slide, please. Gravity is unstoppable. The Eagles have never won a championship game before, but with Gravity on their side, they finally have a chance to win until they meet their match in the final game against the Flyers. Gravity can't beat them all on his own, but everyone on the team has their own special social skill, and together they can work together to win this game. Next slide, please. Charlie Palmer grew up playing street ball in Milwaukee with legendary players just like Gravity and his teammates, who inspired amazing stories that were passed down by word of mouth for years afterwards. This story celebrates the power of teamwork and the unsung street ball heroes who never made it to the NBA, but inspired Charlie to write this book and create these stunning illustrations. This picture book is perfect for storytelling units on folktales and tall tales. Read this book to basketball fans and any kid who enjoys a legendary story. Next slide, please. Mike Curato, creator of the beloved Little Elliott picture book series, dedicates his new picture book to someone who is too shy to be named. And where is Beana Bear? Tiny Rabbit is having a party, but their friend Beana Bear is nowhere to be found. Rabbit searches everywhere. Is that Beana hiding under a lampshade? It looks like Beana, but it must be a lamp. Next slide, please. Is that Beana beneath the table? It could be, but it's probably just a table. While searching for Beana Bear, Rabbit realizes something must be wrong. And finally, Beana Bear admits that they just don't like parties. But that's okay, because Rabbit and Beana Bear are happy to just be spending time together, even if that means hiding together in the middle of a party. Next slide, please. This friendship story is a perfect read aloud that illustrates social anxiety in an accessible and humorous way. This touching picture book is perfect for social emotional learning units about accepting and supporting our friends just the way they are. Next, Angela Dominguez, beloved author of the Stella Diaz chapter book series and more picture books for young readers, delivers a sweet new bilingual picture book in I Am Hungry, Tengo Hambre. This delightful read aloud teaches young readers basic Spanish and English food vocabulary in this sweet call and response story with a twist. An indecisive T-Rex can't decide what he wants to eat, but his friend the bluebird has a few ideas. How about a banana? Plantano? No, gracias. Next slide, please. Or what about a fish? Pescado? No, gracias. Well, then what does he want to eat? Un parajo azul, the T-Rex answers. A bluebird? Well, obviously he can't eat that. Next slide, please. The picture book, the bird suggests some cookies instead. Perfect for Spanish lessons and ESL learners, this book can be used alongside Angela's previous bilingual picture books. How are you? ¿Cómo estás? And how do you say? ¿Cómo se dice? And it delivers as many giggles as storytime favorites like We Don't Eat Our Classmates and If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. Next slide, please. There is perhaps nothing more relatable than the feeling of being out with your parents or caregivers when they run into a friend and just won't stop talking. My mom is one of those parents that takes about an hour to say goodbye when she's talking to a friend, so I know this feeling very well. In this new picture book by popular cartoonists Emma Hunsinger and Tilly Walden, a young girl named Molly can't wait to go to the park with her moms and little brother, but on their way there, they run into their neighbors, their credenzas. Oh no, every time Molly's mom sees the credenzas, they talk forever. Next slide, please. But that's okay. Molly is good at waiting. She counts all the cats in the yard, all of the flowers in Mrs. Credenza's pants, but they are still not done talking. And grown-ups only talk about boring things like cooking vegetables and people she's never even met. It feels like they've been talking for hours, for days, and Molly can't take it anymore. Next slide. She could be at the park. She could be doing a million things, but instead she's stuck waiting forever and ever, and slowly reality slips away until finally her parents are done talking. I love the artwork in this book. It's bright and inventive, and each time you read it, there are new details to discover. This hilarious take on a universal childhood dilemma is laugh out loud funny, with a lesson about patience cleverly tucked in between giggles. Okay, next. Did you know that King Tut was buried with more than 100 pairs of underwear? There are so many fun facts to discover in this excellent nonfiction picture book. Professor Chicken takes readers under his wing as he walks them through the history of underwear as modeled by chickens. From Paleolithic loincloths made from animal fur to the linen underpants worn during ancient Egypt, this book covers the fascinating history of our most private clothing based on entirely true facts, with admittedly more chickens than were actually present. We learn about the Henry VIII's wives wearing underwear on their heads, and Mary Walker, a Civil War surgeon who was arrested for wearing men's underwear instead of petticoats. The book follows how underwear styles and materials changed throughout history and how these changes reflected new developments in technology and the shifting cultural values of society. This engaging read is packed with information and makes history fun for even the most reluctant readers. Next, you may recognize, next please, next slide. Next slide. You may recognize Taiwanese-American artist Julia Kuo as the illustrator of the picture book I Dream of Popo by Livia Blackburn, which we published earlier this year and has received 3-starred reviews. Let's Do Everything and Nothing is Julia's author-illustrator debut, and she is truly a star on the rise. It's not even 2022 yet, and I'm ready to say this is some of my favorite art of the next year. Next slide, please. Including breathtaking full-page spreads with stunning landscapes, this is a beautiful story about the adventures of a caregiver and child, as well as the quiet moments they find together in between. Next slide. Together, they'll scale the tallest mountains and explore the deepest seas. They'll watch clouds together and the ripples in the water during bath time. They'll rest and relax. They'll do everything and nothing because being together is the best journey yet. Next slide, please. This is a soothing and moving story about the everlasting love between child and caregiver, celebrating everyday moments with the classic feel of beloved stories like Matt de la Peña's book, Love. Next slide, please. Emily Calandrelli is an MIT-educated engineer turned Emmy-nominated science TV host. She's the host of her own Netflix show, Emily's Wonder Lab, and was a correspondent on Bill Nye Saves the World, as well as the host of Fox's Exploration Outer Space. Emily is on a mission to make science accessible for everyone, no matter their educational background. She's also the author of the Ada Lace Adventures chapter book series. This heartwarming picture book celebrates the joy of seeing a child reach new milestones and reach for the stars. Next slide, please. This story is a love letter to shared discovery. We watch a child grow from a baby to a young adult through illustrator Hani Zhang's lush artwork that captures the beauty of a child and a caregiver relationship and the beauty of the natural world around us. Next slide, please. Whether it's why the sky is blue or how rocks form, there are all kinds of real science moments represented in this story, celebrating everyday moments of scientific discovery and the inspiration a child feels as they learn new things. Next slide, please. Based on her own experiences with her daughter, Rose, Emily Calandrelli shares the joy of discovery and learning in this emotionally resonant picture book. Next. There are so many reasons you might want to hug a pufferfish. Maybe they just won an award and you want to congratulate them. Maybe they are your very best friend and you want to show them that you love them. They're just so darn cute you can't help but hug them. And it's not that pufferfish don't want to be hugged, but they want to say when and how they're hugged. Next slide, please. They don't like surprises or loud noises. They don't like being tickled or poked. They want to see you coming and they want to be asked for a hug first. Maybe they want a fin shake instead of a hug. Perfect for social emotional learning units, How to Hug a Pufferfish by science teacher Ellie Peterson illustrates the concept of body autonomy through colorful, kid-friendly art. Next slide, please. This group of underwater friends learns about boundaries, personal space, and asking for consent through their friend, the pufferfish. Learning consent and respect for boundaries are such important lessons to talk about early and often with our kids, and this is an accessible introduction to these concepts for even the youngest readers. Next slide, please. As Soo-Yun Lee explains in her author's note, in Korea, they often greet family and friends and even people they've just met by asking, have you eaten? It's not simply asking if someone's ate a meal, it's asking, how are you? While food and eating together is an important part of Korean culture, this phrase became widely used after World War II and the Korean War. Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world, and often people didn't have enough to eat. To show concern, Koreans would ask, have you eaten? While food is more abundant today, the phrase continues to be used to show you care about a person. In this sweet picture book debut, next slide, please, Coco the Chipmunk is known for asking, have you eaten? And sharing sweet potatoes with her friends. While some might find this habit odd, they can't deny that it's comforting and makes them feel cared for. Next slide, please. When Coco falls ill, her new friends return the favor in the same way she taught them, by sharing food. This is a heartwarming story about friendship and the love language of food. And bonus, this book also includes a recipe for Korean-style sweet potatoes. Yum. Next slide, please. Many of our popular and best-selling series are also continuing this winter, including a new Little Bunny book by Rosemary Wells about germs and hygiene, a new Bernard story by Deborah Underwood about story writing, and a new Our Universe book by Stacey McAnulty about climate change and saving the earth. Next slide. And there's even more must-read picture books coming this winter, including stories about historical figures like Chilean poet Pablo Neruda and Mozart's sister Mariana, who is also a talented musician. Adorable animal stories like ABC book A is for Axolotl, Kitty and Bobcat Prowling, a charming friendship story, Wishing Balloons by Jonathan D. Voss, and a hilarious new bedtime story by bestselling author Jory John. This book will get you to sleep. And now I'm going to pass the mic over to Mary to talk about some of our middle grade titles.
Hi, thank you, Kristen, for going through all those wonderful picture books. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you all to a new imprint, Neon Squid. This is a brand new nonfiction imprint from Macmillan. Neon Squid strongly believes that the best stories in the world are the real ones. So they create beautifully illustrated nonfiction books for kids aged 6 to 12 on all sorts of topics, from animals and history to science and space. In their first list, kids will dive deep beneath the waves to discover a sunken ancient Egyptian city undisturbed for thousands of years. They'll trek into the jungles of South America to come face to face with the tiny frog that shared its home with a tarantula, and they'll be inspired by Maria and Marjorie Tall Chief of the Osage Nation, who became the first ballet superstars. They've carefully selected topics from archaeology to symbiosis that shine a light on parts of the world kids might not be overly familiar with, but will spark an interest that could last a lifetime. These books are labors of love, written by experts, illustrated by the best artists around, and produced using the finest materials, including sustainably sourced paper. One title from the list we'll highlight today is Tales of Ancient Worlds. This is an example of taking a slightly obscure subject, archaeology, and turning it into a gripping book of adventure stories. It's Neon Squid's biggest book on their list at 160 pages, and it is geared for 8 to 10-year-olds. This book is very much inspired by Indiana Jones, and it's packed with history. They've picked stories from all around the world, from abandoned pirate towns and Maya fortresses to Egyptian cities found at the bottom of the ocean. The stories flip back and forth between archaeologists making discoveries and the ancient past. So for as an example, you'll see a dramatic Viking burial where they buried a woman along with an entire ship, and then jump forward in time to see what it looked like when they dug it up in the 19th century. The author is Stefan Milosavljevic, an archaeology YouTuber with a great sense of humor and a knack of highlighting parts of history overlooked by others. This is the start of a series with the next title on dinosaurs coming fall 2022. So now we don't have time to present all of their titles today, but I did want to quickly go through the rest of these slides that you can peruse at your leisure after this event. We have animal sidekicks, some art from animal sidekicks. We have the Book of Sisters, personal favorite. We have Big Cats, a start of another series, A Day in the Life series. This is Bugs, another Day in the Life series. And finally, The Hospital, which is start of another series. It'll give a really great inside look at how institutions we all use function. Think of Lisa Brown's The Airport. That picture book did such a good job of showing how an airport functions while still being so readable and delightful. All right, now over to Elise.
Hi, I'm going to kick off the rest of middle grade. So first up, we have Olympians Dionysus. In the final volume of the New York Times bestselling Olympians series, graphic novelist George O'Connor focuses on Dionysus, the god of wine and madness. O'Connor is a New York Times bestselling author and illustrator of the Olympian series and such graphic novels as Journey into Mohawk Country, Ball Peen Hammer with writer Adam Rapp, and Unrig with writer Daniel G. Newman. George's action-packed and highly accessible retellings of Greek myths are perfect for middle grade mythology enthusiasts and fans of Rick Riordan. These graphic novels are also great for Greek mythology curriculums or clubs. Olympians is wildly entertaining and accessible, but it's also rigorously researched by George, and it's rooted in a wealth of historical context. O'Connor has devoted much of his life to studying Greek history and myths, and his research for Olympians is a testament to that. Not to mention George's graceful, dramatic, and highly kinetic illustrations that kids will love. Next, we have Each of Us a Universe by Jean Zulik Ferrulo. This middle grade is about two girls who go on an adventure to the top of Stardust Mountain and learn about each other, themselves, and the magic of friendship, or the magic friendship can bring. It's perfect for fans of Catherine Applegate and Barbara O'Connor. In this book, Cal spends her afternoons plotting to summit Mount Meteorite so she can find the magic she believes will make the impossible possible and heal her mother's cancer. But no one can successfully reach its peak. Well, no one's done it and lived to tell about it anyway. Jean Ferrulo is the author of A Galaxy of Sea Stars and Ruby in the Sky, which earned 2-starred reviews and which book lists called quietly magical. She is also a volunteer with the IRIS Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services in New Haven, Connecticut. The next title is In Harm's Way, Young Readers Edition by Doug Stanton and Michael J. Tugayas. Originally published as an adult book, we now have the Young Readers Edition of In Harm's Way. The original book is a New York Times bestseller, and Doug and Michael's middle grade edition is adapted to be the perfect choice for young adventure seekers and history buffs. In this account of the greatest maritime disaster in U.S. naval history, we revisit July 30th, 1945, when the USS Indianapolis was torpedoed in the South Pacific by a Japanese submarine. By the time rescue arrived, all but 316 out of 900 men had died. In Harm's Way was praised by the New York Post as a stellar and gut-wrenching story of everyday heroes, and Rick Atkinson as infuriating, mesmerizing, and heartbreaking. It was also called impossible to put down. Doug Stanton is a #1 New York Times bestselling author whose writing has appeared in Esquire, the New York Times, Time, the Washington Post, and other national publications. And Michael is the author of many award-winning true rescue stories, including the New York Times bestseller, The Finest Hour, A Storm Too Soon, Into the Blizzard, and Attacked at Sea. And another book we have is Pilar Ramirez and the Escape from Zaffa by Julian Randall. Tristan Strong, Percy Jackson, and the Storm Runner fans, here is your next obsession. Julian Randall is a living queer Black poet from Chicago. His poetry and essays are published in the New York Times Magazine, Poetry, The Atlantic, and Vibe, and he's received several notable awards. Julian holds an MFA in poetry from Ole Miss and has previously worked as a youth mentor, teaching writing workshops to children on house arrest. Pilar Ramirez and the Escape from Zaffa is his children's novel debut. The middle grade is packed with adventure, humor, mystery, incredible magic, and a dynamic and diverse cast. This book is full of Dominican culture, myths, and legends that have rarely been seen in middle grade fiction, including butterfly shapeshifters, flying coconut-shaped demons, and magic fueled by memories and a connection to the island. Not only does this book explore Dominican myths and legends, it also explores the deep, often painful history of the Dominican Republic and the Trujillo regime, all while delivering an entertaining thrill ride. Julian has also included a powerful author's note in the back matter speaking to this history. Pilar's witty, humorous voice lends itself perfectly to this fast-paced page turner and is sure to attract fans of The Storm Runner and Artemis Fowl. Next, we have Button Pusher by Tyler Page. Tyler Page is an Eisner-nominated cartoonist and educator. His book, Raised on Ritalin, was called Essential Reading for Medical Students and Those Involved in Helping Address the Challenges of ADHD by the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Next slide, please. We're thrilled to see him bringing the same dedication to representation for children with ADHD to this middle grade graphic novel memoir, Button Pusher, in which he uses his own childhood experiences to explore what it means to grow up with ADHD. From diagnosis to treatment and beyond, Tyler's story is raw and enlightening, inviting you to see the world from a new perspective. Next slide. And next slide. We have Saving Earth. Inspired by Nathaniel Rich's Losing Earth, A Recent History, the acclaimed book that grew out of an August 2018 issue of the New York Times Magazine solely dedicated to it, Saving Earth tells the human story of the climate change conversation from the recent past into the present day. It wrestles with the long shadow of our failures, what might be ahead for today's generation, and crucial questions of how we understand the world we live in and how we can work together to change the outlook for the better. Enlivened with illustrations from Tim Foley and filled with voices of climate activists from the past and present, this book is both a call to action and a riveting dramatic history. Our favorite part of this book is the way it also serves as a guide for middle grade readers who want to join the work of activists chronicled in the pages. This pairing of history and a guide to activism is going to be essential reading as the impacts of climate change continue to impact our lives now and into the future. Next, we have Moonwalking by Zetta, Elliott, and Lynne Miller Lachman. Zetta Elliott is a Black feminist writer who has been published in many mediums, including her Caldecott Honor picture book, A Place Inside of Me, which received many notable book awards. Lynne Miller Lachman is an author, teacher, and librarian. As an adult, she was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and delves into her diagnosis often in her writing. Moonwalking is a novel in verse for fans of Jason Reynolds and Jacqueline Woodson. It follows two boys in 1980s Brooklyn as they become friends for a season. Moonwalking is a stunning exploration of class, cross-racial friendships, and two boys' search for belonging in a city as tumultuous and beautiful as their hearts. Punk rock loving JJ can't seem to fit in at his new school in Brooklyn as one of the only white kids, and Pi Velez, a math and history geek by day and graffiti artist by night, is eager to follow in his idol Jean-Michel Basquiat's footsteps. The boys stumble into an unlikely friendship, swapping notes on their love of music and art, which sees them through a difficult semester at school and at home. But a run-in with the cops threatens to unravel it all. Don't miss this next read by Zetta and Lynne. Next, we have The Second Chance of Benjamin Waterfalls by James Bird. James Bird, author of Project LIT Selection, The Brave, has written his second middle grade novel called The Second Chance of Benjamin Waterfalls. This book will be available in April 22. This novel is about a boy sent to a Native American boot camp to straighten out his life. James Bird's debut middle grade novel, The Brave, was a Book Riot Best Book of 2020. He is also a screenwriter and director at the independent film company Zombot Pictures. His films include We Are Boats and Honey Glue. A California native of Ojibwe descent, he now lives in Swampscott, Massachusetts with his wife, the author and actor Adriana Mather, and their son. As Bird has proven with The Brave, this story has universal appeal with a flawed but likable character, and it's perfect for fans of Holes, Greetings from Witness Protection, and other books about kids in trouble. Next, we have In the Key of Us by Mariama J Lockington. From author Mariama, we have a middle grade novel about two girls who, while grappling with grief and questions of identity, meet in the summer music camp and begin a gentle romance. Written in a warm and accessible voice about popular themes, friendship, family, first love, and starring a Black protagonist, this book should be front and center in bookstores and on award committees' reading list. Like her protagonist, Mariama is a queer Black woman. Her story highlights the nuances of grief and young romance that young readers will understand and celebrate. Mariama is an adoptee, writer, and nonprofit educator. She is the author of critically acclaimed For Black Girls Like Me, her middle grade novel debut, which earned 5-star reviews and was the Today Best Book of 2019. She is also the author of poetry chapter book, The Lucky Daughter. She holds a master's in education and a master's in fine arts and poetry. Nicole Chung calls Mariama's writing a revelation and a gift, while Elizabeth Avocado praises Mariama for her achingly honest and lyrically rendered storytelling. This is perfect for fans of Jason Reynolds, Sharon Draper, and Nick Stone. And that is it for middle grade. I will pass it off to Mary for young adult.
Hello again, everyone. Next slide, please. We can start with Serendipity. Drum roll indeed. So while #1 New York Times bestselling author Marissa Meyer is best known for fantasy retellings, her secret passion is writing romance. And this probably explains why all of the romances in the Lunar Chronicles are so compelling. Serendipity, 10 Romantic Tropes Transformed, is a true work of love for Marissa. She rounded up some of the most critically acclaimed authors writing YA today, including Leah Johnson, Anna Marie McLemore, Zendaya Menon, and Julie Murphy, to give their take on some of the most well-known romantic tropes. Whether teens love The Secret Admirer, The Matchmaker, or the enemies to lover romances, there is something here for everyone. And best yet, if you have any young aspiring writers, this can provide a model by which to put their own twists on their favorite literary tropes. Next slide, please. Icebreaker is A.L. Graziadei's irresistible debut novel about two hockey players. 17-year-old Mickey James III is a college freshman, brother to 5 sisters, and a hockey legacy. His father and grandfather have gone down in NHL history, and Mickey is almost guaranteed the league's top draft spot, which makes it really complicated when he starts developing feelings for his biggest rival, Jason Caulfield. Jason is infuriatingly attractive and extremely talented, and the romance that develops between these two hockey stars is unforgettable. A.L. was born in Buffalo, New York, and raised on Sabres hockey. Their love for the sport comes through on every page, making it an absolute pleasure to be part of this world, whether or not you're a fan of the sport. Perfect for fans of Check Please in red, white, and royal blue, this is a story about falling in love, struggling with mental health, and seeking help and finding your own path. Next on our list is The Red Palace. June Her has been a real in-house favorite of ours for the last few years since her debut novel, The Silence of Bones, and the follow-up, The Forest of Stolen Girls. As with her previous novels, The Red Palace mixes twisty mystery with lush Korean history, and like The Silence of Bones, it has a basis in actual historical events. But this one adds a new flavor to June's work with the addition of a romance subplot between our two main characters, Hyun and Yojin. It's 1758 in Joseon, Korea, and when 17-year-old Hyun, a lowly palace nurse, goes to visit the apothecary where she was schooled, she's shocked to stumble upon a gruesome murder scene. 4 nurses were killed in the night, and Hyun's mentor is the prime suspect. Determined to prove her beloved teacher's innocence, Hyun launches her own secret investigation. The next day, she returns to examine the crime scene and encounters 18-year-old Ayun, an undercover police inspector also searching for the killer. When evidence begins to point to the crown prince himself as the murderer, they must work together to search the darkest corners of the palace for the truth behind the bloodshed. June's books are compulsively readable and utterly unique, and the real history behind the stories is a real treat for any readers who have a penchant for historical fiction, especially history that has been too little covered in YA. Our next title author has received a Caldecott Honor, a Prince Honor, an Eisner Award, and a Governor General Award. She's the multi-talented New York Times bestselling author and critically acclaimed Mariko Tamaki, probably best known for her 2 YA graphic novels, This One Summer and Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me. Her next novel is a prose thriller in the veins of The Lovely Bones. It is a dual narrative told through the voices of Todd in his afterlife and Georgia as she uncovers the truth behind his death, resulting in an immersive, emotional, and provocative read. As with so many of the best thrillers, Cold unfolds in the last town you'd ever expect a gruesome crime to take place. Todd Mayer was discovered in the town park, naked and frozen in the snow. As detectives investigate the homicide, the ghost of Todd replays the events that led to his end in the park. Our other narrator, Georgia, doesn't know Todd but feels connected to him, maybe because they were both outcasts at their school or possibly because they're both queer. There's something tugging at the back of Georgia's mind that drives her to embark on her own investigation of what led to his death. As a huge fan of both Mariko Tamaki and mysteries, I went into this book with high expectations, and it did not disappoint. Hand this to fans of Sadie and a good girl's guide to murder. Next slide, please. Ophelia, After All, is an exciting debut on our winter list from Raquel Marie. Raquel has a passion for storytelling that stars queer Latinx characters like herself, and Ophelia, After All, is a heartfelt contemporary novel that is a debut to watch. What I love most about Ophelia Rojas, our main character, is just how real she feels. When we start out, she is sure she knows herself and what she likes. Rose gardening, Cuban food, and boys. And that's a lot of boys. She's a real romantic. But when her next crush is Talia Sanchez, it raises so many doubts and fears about who she is and whether her friends and parents will think of her as she shares her feelings. As high school begins to wind down, she is faced with the dilemma that so many teens and adults, to be honest, face. Should she cling to the carefully curated fantasy version of herself that she's always imagined, or upend everyone's expectations, including her own, to rediscover who she is and what she wants? We've received more praise than I can fit on the screen for this book, including Marco Shiro, who called Raquel's debut utterly remarkable, and Leah Johnson, who called the book a queer delight through and through. Next slide. So I hope everyone has had a chance to pick up a copy of one of our just released Remix Classics collection last week. So Many Beginnings by Bethany C. Morrow and A Clash of Steel by C.B. Lee are the first in our Remix Classics series, in which authors from marginalized backgrounds completely reimagine books that have been defined as classics through their own unique cultural lens. Amina May Safi is a Muslim American writer and has always been fascinated by the Middle Ages. Travelers Along the Way is a remix of the classic legend of Robin Hood and begins in Jerusalem in the year 1192 as the Third Crusade rages on. Deeply researched and masterfully written, the story follows sisters Rama and Zena and who are part of the war over the Holy Land. While Rama has grown wary of continuing a war when the tides are turning against them, Zena refuses to give up the fight while Jerusalem is still in danger of falling back into the hands of Queen Isabella. As you'd hope for in any Robin Hood retelling, or in this case, remix, there is a wonderfully diverse and motley band of merry misfits who use every scrap of what they've got and a fair amount of thievery to foil Queen Isabella's plans. This book presents the Middle Ages like you've never seen them before. It is a must-read addition to the Remix Classics collection. Next slide, please. Whew, any new book by Anna Marie McLemore is cause for so much excitement. They are the author of The Weight of Feathers, a finalist for the 2016 Morris Debut Award, 2017 Stonewall Honor Book, When the Moon Was Ours, which was long listed for the National Book Award in Young People's Literature, Wild Beauty, Blanca y Roja, Dark and Deepest Red, and A Mirror Sees In. Lake Lore is a beautiful romance between two neuroatypical, non-binary Mexican teens who are pulled into a magical world under a lake. The rumors above world are that the lake is half air and half water. Bastian Silvano grew up both above the lake and in the otherworldly space beneath it. Laura Garcia has only ever been under the lake once, but that encounter changed their life forever, and the two of them must come together to navigate their secrets as the line begins to blur between air and water. Early reviews from readers have been really spectacular. One reviewer noting that when it comes to ADHD representation, it is an absolute knockout of a book. Add this one to the top of your TBR. Next slide, please. The Silent Unseen. Fans of historical fiction, this is a great season for YA titles for you, and I have yet another one to add to the list. Former high school English teacher and turned bookseller in Nashville, Tennessee, Amanda Macrina has a knack for identifying underreported stories from historical events. It's July 1944 in Poland, and 16-year-old Maria is on her way home after years of forced labor in Nazi Germany, only to find that her village is destroyed and her parents were killed in a war between the Polish resistance and Ukrainian nationalists. Adding to her shock, she finds her brother, she thought dead, in charge of the local resistance. When he goes missing, she's determined to find him, and the only person she seems able to trust is a young Ukrainian prisoner who, against the odds, she finds has a growing connection with. As with Amanda's first book, Traitor, this is a lesser known part of World War II history that adds more context to the so often examined period of world history. Give this to fans of Elizabeth Wine or Ruta Sepetys. Next slide. This is the last YA title I'll be presenting, and for those of you who can't get enough retellings, you do not want to miss Axios' The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. This is an enthralling feminist retelling of the classic Korean folktale, The Tale of Shim Chong. Each year in Mina's homeland, a beautiful maiden is thrown into the sea to appease a sea god, a once protector who now curses the land with death and despair in the form of deadly storms that bring floods that sweep out entire villages. When the beloved of Mina's older brother is about to be sacrificed to the sea god, Mina takes her place and is swept away into the spirit realm. This is a magical city of lesser gods and mythical beasts, and she's seeking out the sea god, only to find him caught in an enchanted sleep. With the help of a mysterious man named Shin, as well as a motley crew of demons, gods, and spirits, Mina sets out to wake the sea god and bring an end to the killer storms once and for all. Next slide, please. We have so many great YA titles coming this season, so consider this your reminder to visit us on NetGalley to request more great books. And then over to Kristen.
Thank you so much, Mary. I am thrilled to be introducing a new middle grade novel, Northwind by Gary Paulsen. Readers who love the classic classroom favorite and Newbery Honor book Hatchet will be thrilled to have a stunning new historical adventure story from Gary. This story was inspired by a sailing trip Gary took up the West Coast from Ventura, California to Alaska, and Northwind is set on the coast of Norway centuries ago. When a deadly plague decimates his fishing village, an orphan named Leaf is forced to take to the water in a cedar canoe. He flees northward, following wild fjords, navigating from one danger to the next. The deeper into his journey he paddles, the closer he comes to recognizing his own strength and discovering his truest self as he connects to the heartbeat of the ocean and the pulse of the landscape. As Gary explains, this is not only an adventure story, it's a story about the beauty of nature, and truly a book that came from Gary's heart and soul, inspired by his own Nordic heritage with Norse mythology woven throughout the story. This is our third new release from Gary Paulsen this year. In October, we'll release the laugh out loud, eco-friendly middle grade novel, How to Train Your Dad. And earlier this year, we published Gone to the Woods, a middle grade memoir about Gary's life and the teachers and librarians who helped shape him into the writer he is today. Without further ado, I'll let Gary tell you a little bit more about Northwind coming in January 2022.
Hi, I'm Gary Paulsen. I've been asked to say a few words about Northwind, which is, I've heard one man say it's like Hatchet with whales. It's not really. It's more than that. Years ago, I tried sailing. I sailed to Fiji. I sailed the Sea of Cortez for a while, and I sailed from Ventura, California, up to Alaska, up the west coast and then inside, and it was stunning. The beauty was stunning, and I started thinking in terms then about a book about a boy who makes that run, only almost in prehistory, in a dugout cedar canoe. I was in a small sailboat, but you can do it in a canoe. What happened is it became a labor of love. Things that I had done that I had tried to tell other people that I'd never been able to, that I'd never done before. My life is largely formed by school teachers and librarians and people who love or are involved with books. And what happened with this book is that it became a labor of love, like I said. And for me, it was, I related it as going inside the diamond. I started in this thing, the book, as a book. And the next thing I know, it is more than a book. It's inside me. It's kind of soul writing. I know how that sounds woo. I don't mean it that way. At one point in this thing, when I was doing it, a large male killer whale just stayed next to the boat. I was tied up to some trees, and his fin was right there. And I just thought, well, I was having a cup of tea at 3 a.m. It was daylight. I thought, well, if I don't touch that fin, I'll always wonder. So I just reached out and I just kind of touched it. It was right there, right there. I touched it, and he rolled, looked at me, and then stayed there. And I thought, okay, I've been accepted. And it's the most wonderful feeling to be accepted by that, by nature, by that wildness. And it's affected me my whole life. I hope anybody who reads this thinks in terms of going inside the diamond, not just. I mean, there are a lot of whales, and it's a lot of survival, and it's a lot of wilderness, because that's what that is. When you watch glaciers calving large chunks to become icebergs, you realize how important everything is but us, but me. Anyway, I hope everybody enjoys this book and finds the beauty in it that I found writing it. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Don't forget to tweet us at MacKidsSL and subscribe to our newsletter and keep in touch. Our contact information is on the screen. We would love to hear from you. We're always here to talk books. Take care, and we're going to kick things over to Brianna from Booklist to share a few final notes with you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Kristen and Team Macmillan, for that amazing webinar. Tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slides, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit www.booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those you see here. Patron-friendly, librarian-approved, and free with a Booklist subscription, Booklist Reader, Booklist new digital-only magazine highlighting diverse readers' advisory recommendations for all ages, just launched. To see and share the inaugural issue, visit booklistonline.com/reader-issues. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. One more huge thank you to all of our panelists today and our sponsor, MacKids School and Library. This concludes today's webinar. We'll see you next time.